Hello and welcome to tonight's episode of Reboot Represents. I'm your host, Harry Turpin, and with me in the studio is producer and fellow board member Kevin Tanner. We'll start tonight's program by taking a moment to unequivocally state that Black Lives Matter. We'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge wherever you're joining us from, you are on Indigenous land. This show itself is broadcasting on the historic and contemporary lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and all Coast Salish people. We acknowledge the forced displacement of Native communities from this land while honoring the endurance of the Duwamish people, who still live here. To this day, the Duwamish people have yet to receive federal recognition. We encourage you to visit the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center in West Seattle to learn more. Tonight is our 10th episode of Reboot Represents. We're excited for you. We're excited to be here, and we're excited that you've been along on this journey with us. And we hope you will continue to join us for all of the great programming that we have lined up for you. Be sure to check out reboottheater.org or our Facebook page for more information. March is Women's History Month, and I'm really excited to welcome to our show tonight, entitled Black Women Leaders in Seattle Theater, the following guests, each of whom is established and working in our community. First, joining me tonight is Kataka, Kat Korn, they, them. Kataka is a young musical theater artist in the Seattle area. They have previously been seen in Arts West Playhouse and Gallery's 2019 production of Head Over Heels. Since quarantine, Kat has been involved in virtual cabarets, including Arts West Gala Wrap-Up Party, Village Theater's Beyond the Curtain series, and recently upcoming the Fifth Avenue Theater's 15-minute stories and adventure musical theater program. COVID cancellation gigs include the Fifth Avenue Theater's 2020 Shrek the Musical as the Dragon, and Village Theater's 2020 beta series show Homefront as Maya. Please welcome to the show, Kat. Next up is Cammi Smith, she, her. Cammi is a longtime singer and actor active in Seattle since 2018 and remaining active during COVID, thankfully, with productions getting more creative with distance theater. Cammi was cast by Reboot in 2 productions, Sweeney Todd and Cabaret. Welcome to the show, Cammi. And finally, rounding out our panel tonight is Michelle Blackman. Michelle, she, her, has had an extensive career as an actress, director, choreographer, theater arts instructor, film casting assistant, stage manager, and more in Washington and Oregon, with additional forays across the country. She has taught acting for the sign language program at Seattle Central Community College, worked as a community ambassador for Seattle Repertory Theater, and has performed in the Soviet Union as part of a cultural arts exchange, and recently retired from the city of Seattle, working for both the Office of Arts and Culture and Seattle Center. And Michelle is now very excited to be able to take occasional naps when desired. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have all of you here. I just want to do a quick check-in before we dive into our questions. And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time for Reboot Represents, we will do a series of questions, and then there will be a question and answer period at the very end for you to go ahead and ask any questions of our guests. And we will try to get to all of those as we can. So I just want to do a check-in and see how you all are doing. It's been a hot minute since I've seen you, Cammi. I know, Kat, you and I saw each other at the beginning of COVID via the cabaret that we had done, and Michelle, you and I have just communicated over phone. So how are you folks doing today?
As good as we can, I guess.
Managing to muddle through the madness.
Right. It's
almost COVID shots.
That's great. You've got both of your COVID shots. That's awesome. How did it feel? Are you any side effects or anything?
No side effects at all.
That's great. That's awesome. Good. Well, it's kind of crazy. I was chatting with my roommate, and it's just a little crazy. We were sitting there going, last year feels like forever ago, but yet not at all, right? It's a very strange thing to sort of imagine last year being last year. And I know for myself, I have issues writing the date where I kind of forget that we're in 2021. Like 2020 didn't exist really. So I don't know how it is for everybody else, but I guess we just adjust to the new normalcy of whatever this is.
It does feel very strange.
It does. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here for our panel on Women's History Month. And I want to start off by celebrating each of you. And I'd love to know what led you to the arts. And I'm wondering if each of you could tell me a story about a powerful moment in the theater where you witnessed a woman's power and the effect that it had on you, a profound effect on you. And we'll start with you, Kat.
Oh gosh, I would have to say a time that I witnessed a powerful moment.
Oh, it looks like we might be having some technical difficulties for Kat. technical difficulties there. The magic of live theater, I suppose, and looks like maybe Kat might be reconnecting. So we're going to move on, and we'll come back to Kat in just a moment. Let's go to you, Cammi.
A moment where I saw a woman be powerful would be. It's actually every time I've seen Defying Gravity performed on stage, but especially the first time I ever saw it performed on stage in Broadway, like 4 years ago. I'd been doing theater like before that, but gosh, like when she goes into the air and she's going la 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 la, like oh my gosh, total goosebumps every single time. And I have so much respect for any actor that's portrayed that character, like the amount of power they have to feel in that moment. That they must like be able to run 10 miles after every time they perform that number, because oh my gosh, it resonates off of them. So that's the moment for me.
What was so powerful about that for you? Like when you were standing there and just witnessing this sheer strength and essentially the athleticism of that particular moment, right? What was it that really resonated with you and just kind of? And you had been performing at that particular point, is that right?
Yeah. I was performing, but like not like that.
Did you take anything away from that performance that you said, yeah, I could do this, or it made you stand a little differently or think a different way?
It just opened my eyes to just how powerful theater is, how how much raw emotion a performance can just elicit. Like for that actor, that's probably like the 8th time that she performed that week. So like it's probably like nothing for her, but for everybody in the audience, and I was in the 3rd row too. I was right there. Oh my gosh, it was just insane, an intense emotional feeling. That honestly lasted for the rest of the show. I was like crying.
That's
like
awesome. Yeah, it's such a great feeling to see that moment and go into intermission. You're riding high, right? Defying gravity yourself, and then you come back. All right, thank you so much, Cammi. Kat, we're going to jump back to you and see if we can get that story from you. Then we are having just a few technical difficulties.
Okay, so
All right.
just a few. Okay, so it was, of course, in Hamilton that I saw both Angelica Schuyler and Elizabeth Schuyler, and they both showed 2 different forms of strength from what I saw. Angelica was very bold and forthcoming when she said, "I'm going to persuade Thomas Jefferson," in the sequel, as she put it.
Oh no, we lost Kat. We lost. So, folks, we're having some issues with Kat's technical aspects at home. For whatever reason, it is not really liking our platform here. We will try to bring Kat in and out on the program as much as we can. I just want to let you know what's going on there. We definitely feel for Kat, and and hopefully they will be back shortly. We are going to move ahead to Michelle. Michelle, if you want to share your story.
Well, there were 2 moments for me. And the first one was, I'm telling on myself now, 1967. I saw Leslie Uggams star in Hallelujah Baby at the Martin Beck Theater in Broadway. And one of her co-stars was Robert Hooks. And he happened to be the uncle of a classmate of mine in junior high school. And that's why we went to see the production in the first place. My mother took me to see it. Well, watching her was awe-inspiring. It's the first time I saw a Black woman on the stage and doing a starring role. And wow, I just sat there with my mouth hanging open, watching her perform and masterfully take the stage. But the second one, the one that really got me hooked, was in 1975. I had the opportunity to go see the original Broadway production of The Wiz, the all-Black version of The Wizard of Oz, at the Majestic Theater. And it was Stephanie Mills as Dorothy, Dee Dee Bridgewater as Glinda, Mabel King as Eveline, Clarice Taylor as Ada Pearl, and Tasha Thomas as Aunt Em. Well, all that girl power, that gorgeous girl power on stage just blew me away, and I was forever hooked. And I even have the original program.
Oh, that's awesome.
From that night with, all of them, the cast. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that really took me into wanting to do theater.
That's so amazing. That's I got goosebumps when you brought up the program. I was like, oh, piece of theater history. I love that. I love it.
And, and it's that thing where you go, oh my God, I want to do that. But then it's, I can't do that. So I had to get through that part of it to get to the other side. But that's what started me down that road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's amazing. That's a great story. All right. Welcome back, Kat. We are going to, this might be our bit for the evening. You might come in and out for the evening, which is fine. We're going to play with it and we'll go along with it. You were telling us a story about the Schuyler sisters. And if you want to pick that up, that would be great. And we might lose Kat again. Oh, I think Kat is frozen. There are some issues there. Well, we might have to move on and then see, just so that way we're continuing the continuity of the show. Oh, I think we've got Kat. We'll bring Kat right back in and see what happens. Kat, go. You're on.
Okay, here we go. So, true or not, continuing on from my story, I believe that Angelica Schuyler perfectly demonstrates the true nature of a bold, brilliant, brave, powerful, and virtually fearless woman in a society that is so male dominant and even pursuing a career based in politics. And just like her sister Eliza succeeded in all that she pursued. And she wasn't quite as book smart as Angelica, but she was just as passionate, which served her so well when preserving the legacy of her late husband, Alexander Hamilton.
Did we freeze again? That was great, though. I loved that. Well, hopefully we'll get unfrozen in just a moment. We are going to move on just a little bit here. I wonder if there's a moment in your history where you have felt incredibly powerful, something you did on stage where you felt in that moment you were making a difference, or maybe there was an interaction with an audience member or a cast member where you realized you had an impact on that person. We'll start with you, Michelle.
Well, for me, it was playing the Snow Queen in the play The Snow Queen at Seattle Children's Theater back in the day, a long time ago, when they were still at the Poncho Theater at the zoo. It was so much fun watching the faces of the kids, because I played a troll in the first scene, a troll. And in the top of the second scene, I magically appeared upstage waiting for my reveal. And so the curtain opens and they've just seen me go off stage, and then they see the back of the Snow Queen in a totally different costume. And when I turn around for my reveal, now they knew it was me because I was the only Black person in the cast. So, the kids at the end of the show were like, "How did you do that?" And I just told them it's theater magic. And they were in awe of the power of the Snow Queen. And it was exciting to me to be able to show them that a Black woman could do that. So, it was great fun doing that role every performance. Very exhausting, but it was great fun. There were also many teaching experiences that were transformative to me. But one in particular was a summer musical theater workshop that I created and taught at what is now Aki Kuroski Middle School in South Seattle. And there was one young Black girl in particular who, as we started getting into rehearsals, in the first rehearsal, she wouldn't sing with everybody else. And, I kept trying to encourage her, come on, sing. And she just said she didn't want to. So I pulled her aside and I said to her, why do you want to be in this workshop? And she said, because she wanted to learn how to sing and dance. And I said, well, if you want to learn how to sing and dance, you have to do it. And so she reluctantly started to sing. And I saw immediately what the problem was. She was not a soprano like the rest of the little girls. She was a contralto.
Mm.
So I stood next to her. And Harry, my
contralto. I think maybe you're pushing it, Michelle. It might be.
So I stood next to her and I started singing her part in tenor.
Mm-hmm.
And she turned and looked at me very amazed, and she smiled and started singing very loudly. And that was the moment for her. She came out of her shell. She became one of the stars in the show. And that's when I knew I had the power to change someone's life. And I actually ran into her several years later, and she told me how much that impacted her in a positive way. And that made me very happy that I could do something like that for a young person.
Oh, I love that story. I love that story. Do you know if she went on to continue performing, or it was just sort of a thing that she had done for the summer?
She did for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I saw her a couple of years after that, so I don't know if she kept it in her life. But yeah, she was very good. She just didn't think that because she didn't sound like everybody else, you know, all the other girls, that she could do what she wanted to do. And me just standing next to her gave her permission to do that.
Well, and we'll get into that a little bit later in terms of being different and still doing the job, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what a great story and a great lesson for everybody to take away is, you know, just because you don't have to be the same. Please don't be the same, right? That's so magical and lovely. Cammi, what about you? What about you for a moment where you realized that you had an impact and perhaps changed somebody?
Well, I know. Well, a role that I played that made me feel powerful, that I'm sure had to impact someone because of just the role it was it's a show called Disenchanted. I was actually able to do the show twice, once in Seattle and once in Connecticut a couple years ago. And I played the only Black character in the show, the princess who kissed the frog. And she is featured mostly in the second act, but she has the end of Act 1 big act ending song, and it's called Finally. And it's essentially a play on the fact that the Princess and the Frog in Disney, they can't say this actually in the show because, you know, like suing, but
right. Those Disney lawyers are famous, yes.
But it's very on the nose that like it's making fun of the fact that it took all of this time, how many decades, for a Black princess to finally, you know, into the fold. And it's kind of done that in the show too, because I don't show up until the very end of the first act. And what's great about that number is that it is just totally empowering her. It starts with her. She's in this insanely extravagant dress. It's this huge hoop skirt, and the second time I did, I actually had a great wig artist named Bobby Pins. He's like actually pretty like well known out in Broadway, and he made me this huge tall beehive wig. It was just an insane outfit, and it's great because it's very belty, and the spotlight's on me, and I'm talking about, you know what, we finally got a Black princess up in here. Let's have some fun. And then halfway through the number, I actually go off stage and do a literal 20-second quick change into like a much shorter dress with a different wig, and the biggest, most powerful feeling was actually similar to Michelle, is coming out. As soon as the other actors, they're going, here she is, and I come out, and the audience is just totally amazed because I'm wearing a completely different outfit, and it's just, yeah, sorry, I'm going on about this because
this is great. I love it. This is awesome.
But yeah, it was really great that I was able to play that role twice, because that feeling by itself, and everybody cheering, I get all these cheers afterwards. It makes me feel really, really good, and I know that that's impactful to all of the. I remember distinctly when I did it in Seattle. It was a 5-week run, so there was a lot of shows, but I do remember a little Black girl, and she was wearing a princess costume, and she like came up to me afterwards and she said, "Thank you for being the princess who kissed the frog," or something like that. But it was just really nice. I'm like, yes, I knew I was going to reach out to somebody, because that was me. And I think I was an adult when the Princess of the Frog came out, but like that was me, like growing up. All the princesses were not Black. So
right.
That was really, really cool to have that experience. I think it only happened one time, but still, like that was pretty amazing.
That's amazing. I also do want to commend that little girl for also not utilizing the Disney name, so that way she didn't get sued when she talked to you. She called it the Princess of the Frog as well. So good for her for recognizing that lawsuit is lingering out there. It looks like we do have Kat. We're going to give this another go with Kat. Hi, Kat. Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and the question that we're talking about is a moment where you felt powerful. So we'll throw that to you.
Yes. So I had one moment when I was on stage and I felt super powerful was when I played Fantine from Les Mis for Village Theater Kids Stage Summer Stock. And Fantine is very strong, and I think that people misinterpret her as just like this weak and helpless person when she has so much fight and so much strength. And that's why she even though Jean Valjean comes up and he's like this super nice guy, like, how can I help you? She's like, you let this happen to me. You didn't stick up for me when you could have. And I think that was powerful. But the most powerful I felt was when superfan Michaela came up to me for when I played Mopsa in Head Over Heels at Arts West. And
Oh, we lost Kat right in the middle of that story. We will bring Kat back, hopefully. Kat, for those of you who are joining us, Kat is having some technical difficulties. We want to keep Kat in the show because they are an integral part of our programming tonight. And so we'll keep going back and forth. And thanks for everybody for watching with us and learning as we go. Technical theater, everything can go wrong and probably will at some point. We are going to move on just a little bit and while we wait for Kat to join us. So today, March 8th, is International Women's Day. And as we know, the entirety of March is Women's History Month. Every Women's Month has a theme, and this year's theme and part of this year's theme is refusing to be silenced, with a focus on political involvement and leadership. Frances Barber said that all theater is political, just as all other activities of human beings are political, because theater is not autonomous and must thus decide whose interests it serves. So in that context, when you are picking your projects, how much weight do you give to the message of the show and what it is saying? What factors go into picking the projects that you choose to be a part of? And do you have any examples of a project you picked because of the political implications? And we'll start with you, Cammi.
That's great. So I'll start with like the factors that go into when I pick a show, and I've actually evolved this over time. It used to be that like I saw a show that I liked and I just went and did it. And I had some lessons learned over the years, like in shows that had experiences that kind of form this sort of thing. So now I actually do have some factors that I actually like think about before I agree on to take on a project. First of all, the message of the show. Mm-hmm. And that's usually pretty easy for shows that are like have been around, but it's especially important for new shows. I've actually been involved with 2 brand new shows in the past year, like over COVID, and I took very seriously the message of that show as well as the message of the writer of that show, because I actually was able to like speak with the writer directly both times. Those 2 different writers. But another thing that's important is the message of the director's vision. That's actually a question I like to ask every time I do an audition. If the director's there, I like to ask them what their vision is, and kind of maybe gauge for myself if that's like problematic or not. So people are human, and especially if some productions don't have diverse production crews, like if you're gonna do like a show like Hairspray and you have no Black people in the production crew, they're probably gonna be some maybe decisions made that won't have the context that they need. So definitely director's vision. And then there's also a message sent based on who's cast. So if in the Black community, colorism is actually a really big issue in the Black community, especially in theater and in Hollywood. Far too much, and for the wrong reasons. Lighter skinned women are chosen over darker skinned women. And it is not because, I mean, I'm sure of course, they're all talented and I'm not going to say that they don't deserve the role, but it has happened. It's proven over time that darker skinned women are time and time again snubbed for lighter skinned women in those roles. And I've seen it. I've seen it in Seattle. I've seen it on Broadway. And it really sends a message, and it kind of reinforces this ideal that Blackness is not beautiful, that dark skin is not beautiful, that light skin, you have to lighten your skin to be pretty. And that's problematic. And I definitely keep an eye out for that. Like if I notice I'm in a cast and I'm not particularly dark skinned myself. And if I notice that there's not a lot of dark skinned women in the cast, but there's a lot of dark skinned men in the cast, that kind of tells us a little bit something about how the show was cast, and that's happened before. And then also the message is sent based on what I'm cast as. I was really privileged to be able to be in a production last year where I was cast I was cast in multiple characters, but one of my characters was a maid. And the production crew, especially the writer and the director, they came to me personally and asked me, how do I feel about being in that role? Because, I'm a Black woman, and they cast me as a maid. So they actually took the initiative to come to me first and make sure I was comfortable from all the way back from the audition. They kept checking in as we went through the production, all the way to the end in post-production. They still are reaching out and saying, are you still okay with this? We want you to be okay with how you're portrayed here. And we want you to know that it is for a reason. We're not doing this because that's how it's supposed to be. We're doing it has an intention behind it, and we want you to be okay with that intention. So that actually leads me to the last part that I keep in mind, and is how open the production crew is to feedback, especially if something is problematic. Do they listen to their crew? Do they listen to their actors? Do they listen to the audience? And I can say with confidence that that last production crew I worked with, and even the one I'm currently working with my next project, I 100% have confidence that they would take everything that I say to heart, and that they would take it seriously. I've been in shows where they wouldn't do that, so that's the reason why those factors are all things that I keep in mind before I do a project. So
that's great. What a great list to be able to go through and check and make sure that your mental health and your safety is taken care of before you go into any project. I do have a follow-up question, and I'm not quite sure how to word it, so forgive me if I stumble a little bit. But in the instance where they were checking in with you, did you ever feel was it the appropriate amount? Did it feel ever too much? Did it feel too less? How did you feel about that?
I think it felt like good. It was the good amount, mostly because far too often they don't check in at all in other productions I've been in, where it'd be like maybe a mostly Black cast or half Black cast, and we would all just be whispering amongst ourselves, like, is nobody going to say anything? Like, should we go? Like, it's not a fault on the people. It's just like people have experiences that make it so that they notice certain things, and if you don't have those experiences, you won't notice. So I felt like it was the right amount, just because it was some amount, because most don't give any. So yeah.
Right. That's great. You should think about publishing the Cammi Smith list, essentially, of things to look out for when accepting a project. You could probably make some money off of that for sure, and help some other artists. I do want to just take a moment. If you are joining us for Reboot Represents and you have a question for our panelists, go ahead and put it in the chat. We will try to get to it before the hour is up. Also, I do want to mention that Kat did have technical difficulties, and we had a little side conversation. Kat will be joining us for a future episode of Reboot Represents, but they will not be back for the remainder of this evening. Unfortunately, we are sad to lose Kat this evening, but we will soldier on. We will continue on. And thank you, Kat, for your participation, for being here for the time that we did get to have you. Michelle, what about you in terms of projects that you pick, political implications, messages, and things like that?
Well, I've had experiences similar to Cammi, auditioning for things, and you go out and you wind up auditioning for the maid role. And I once asked in a production, could I do a different role? And they gave me an obligatory audition, and I knew it wasn't real. So I, chose not to be involved, because I really didn't want to be the maid in that particular production. So, but I find, the fact that I have often been the only or one of two Black people in a production is a political statement in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to take whatever advantage of that I can through my performance. In doing productions as an actor, you don't get to choose often, because I spent a lot of time as a freelance person and doing nothing else. And so that was my paycheck. And so you have to do what you get cast in.
Right.
So you don't get to choose it all the time. But I do get to choose the things that I direct. And those choices have been political and thoughtful in terms of what I want feel like I want to put out there in the world. For example, Curly Victorious, which is about integration in the South, then doing The Wiz, which a young person coming into their voice and finding out what matters most in life, and oppression, and people going through oppression and finding freedom. I did Having Our Say, which is about the Delaney sisters. It's the Delaney sisters, their first 100 years, because they almost reached 100 before they passed. And actually, I think one of them did just past 100 before she passed. The Color Museum, which is a satire of, a satire on identity and Black stereotypes. A soldier's play about racism in during World War II. Hair, about hippie culture, the sexual revolution, racism, and opposition to the Vietnam War. And hopefully, if COVID releases us by the summer of 2022, Harry, you and I will be doing Ragtime.
Yes, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Which is about class, racism, and integration. And so, and also the need to belong, because as we evolve as people in our own personal being, we find we have different needs and different ideas of what belonging means. And so I really love that piece for that. And so there's a lot of it all in there, and I try to take all of the things that I've been through in my life and put it into the things that I work on.
So do you feel, and this question is for both of you, do you feel that by picking projects that possibly have, with the messages and the political leanings of those, that you in any sort of way are displaying leadership yourself? Or is that something that goes into your mind as you're picking those projects?
I think for me, it's less leadership, more I feel responsible, especially for shows that are a little bit more controversial. I've been in shows. I'm actually in a show that is based on a very controversial issue that's ongoing and has been ongoing for the past 30 odd years. I don't know if I'm allowed to say what it is, but I feel a sense of responsibility that I need to portray the vision of the obviously the voice of the author, the writer. The writer had an intention when writing the show, and I love the book. Like, I read the book, I make sure it's right. Like, I make sure they're not making any claims that are not good. But I want to preserve their voice, portraying the vision of the director, as well as staying true to the conflict, staying true to since it is based on reality. It's something that's real. It's going to affect people for real, people that have experienced it, people that are currently experiencing it. It's important to do it right. And then finally, true to myself, I need to make sure that whatever work I'm doing is not making me betray my own morals or my own ideals. So it's really less of leadership, more I just feel responsible. I feel accountable to do it right, to put in the work to make sure that it's done the right way. So
that's great. I love that summary. And leadership, I think, takes all sorts of different forms, right? And in the responsibility aspect, to make sure that you're doing it right, is a form of leadership. I mean, we've all seen those productions where it's been sloppy and just completely wrong the way that they've done it. And there's definitely a sense of ownership as you take those steps forward to be able to say, I need to get this right because it matters not just to me, but to the people who are watching it, to the people I'm representing. I love that answer. Thank you so much, Cammi. What about for you, Michelle?
I agree with much of what Cammi said. It's not so much about feeling like, oh, I have to exude leadership, but it's about taking the responsibility to make sure if I'm involved in a production that I am presenting it with honesty and integrity, and that I'm doing what I can to make sure that the message of, as you said, the author and my own voice is heard through it, whatever I feel I want to endow that production with, and that I do it in a way that the audience will receive that message and respond to it. And not, one of the things for me that's important is not being afraid to show when I don't know something. I'm not afraid to say, hey, I need help with this. I don't know how to do this thing. So, my big example is when I directed a soldiers play. I did not try to tell those men how to salute, how to, do all of that. I brought in someone from the National Guard and had them come in and do drills with them and show them all of the ins and outs of, how to properly do, those things. And when there was a moment that those guys had to come together and they were having a good time and they were doing things that guys do, I would allow them to come up with whatever it was that they were going to do. I said, you need to come up with a guy moment here, a guy bonding moment. And I said, well, you can't high five because that hadn't come
right.
But but you've got to come up with something that's similar to that and allow them to find their way through that. Because, again, as a woman, I didn't want to try and put that upon them. I needed for them to organically work through that. And I try to find ways to help actors organically work through moments like that so that it becomes real for them and not just me throwing a bunch of stuff at them.
Right. There's nothing more disillusioning than watching fake business where you're like, you don't even know what you're doing. Clearly the director told you to do that thing and you have no idea or no vested interest in what that is. We've all been there. We've all seen it. We've all done it. We're like, wait, what do you want me to do? Okay, I guess I'll do that.
And, the same as a performer. It's finding those things inside of you that really speak to me that I know I can then, give to the audience, and hopefully they will receive it in the way that, I've intended. And so that's really important to me, so that the performance is alive and it's real and it's honest.
Yeah, that's a great segue into my next question, and the honesty, which is, so there's another quote out there that says, theater is a powerful art form. It teaches lessons about life, society, and emotion, and more importantly, yourself. And that's by Anastasia Roberts. I want to know what each of you have learned about yourselves by doing theater. And we'll start with you, Michelle.
Well, the first thing that I've learned is that I can do more than I thought I could. That I am stronger than I thought I was. And if I work hard, I can do more than I thought I could. Because there have been times when I have been terrified to go into a role or do something because it just felt like it was beyond me. And then I start working on it and I, keep working on it. And Harry, you well know this. you keep working and, you get through it, and sometimes you surprise yourself. So those things have been wonderful. I've learned that.
I would love to just interrupt for just a moment here, Michelle, and say one of the things that I really love about you, and as over the course of us working together, is that you identified a problem and you said, hey, this is hard for me. This is really, really hard for me. I don't know how to do this. This is hard. And then what was amazing is that you acknowledged that it was hard, and then the next time you did it, it wasn't so hard, and that you just kept working on it until you became essentially, you mastered the skill and you made it look effortless and easy. And I really just want to kind of put that and celebrate you for a moment in that moment, because I love your work ethic and I love the fact that you're able to acknowledge what the issue is and then work through it and then be able to make it your own. So anyway, I just want to put that out into the universe.
Well, thank you. I mean, we all go through that. You take on things and sometimes you feel you've bitten off more than you can chew. And, where do you go from here? Well, okay, I have to, strap on my girdle and put the big girl panties on and suck it up and move forward.
Right.
And you do that. And, sometimes amazing things come out of that. And being afraid, particularly when we're doing performances often that other people have done. And when you've seen Broadway performances of the same thing and you go, okay, well, I have to try and live up to that in some way. And it's daunting at times. And because, as a performer, you feel you want to give everything you can. But that's the thing I've learned. Now, what I do on stage is going to be different than,
of course,
what someone else did. But it's being able to overcome the fear and move through it and get to something that can be amazing. And that's what I love about theater, because it allows people to break themselves free of all the inner, inhibitions that they have, the inner fears, the doubt, the, things that go through your head. And when you can come out on the other side and do something that you feel you're proud of, that's an amazing feeling. And I love that about theater. And I love what it does for people, which is why I teach theater, because I want other people to have that. Regardless of whether you ever want to do it as a profession, it's the gift that it gives you as a human being, I find, is so amazing. And, the fact that, adding to that, I find that I can inspire people in that way. And I love that, to give people inspiration to be a better self.
I love that. I love everything that you just said. What about for you, Cammi? What have you learned about yourself doing theater?
I've learned that I have a very, very deep emotional connection to music. It's definitely, that's part why I actually particularly love musicals. I do like plays too. I enjoy plays, but musicals, I cry every single time, even if it's not sad, or it just, for some reason, when the orchestra, sometimes I weep when the orchestra happens. If it's a particularly powerful overture, like Phantom of the Opera, oh my gosh, I just get so overwhelmed. And the biggest example I have of this, and I'm going to toot your horn a little bit, Harry.
Oh.
I watched on Once on This Island on Broadway a few years back. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it. It was totally cold, and it was amazing. If y'all knew about that production, it was like there was like sand on the ground, and it was the most cool thing. But the story and the music, like when they the start of the show started with these wind tunnel sounds, and it was just so unique. And the storytelling, there is an island where rivers run deep, and the bass comes in, and I just started crying immediately. And I was right in the front too, my feet in the sand, and my neighbors are like, oh, she's gonna be that kind of person. I was pretty much crying that entire show because it was just such a beautiful story, and the music was so impactful to me. So fast forward about a year later, a director named Harry Turpin is directing Once on This Island. I'm like, I loved that show. I'm going to go see that show. So I came to your show. It was one of your last dress rehearsals. My friend Patrick was in the show too, and he invited me. And I was thinking, I love the show and I love the music, but it's probably not going to have the same effect on me because it's a smaller theater. It's not Broadway. As soon as the music happened, and Katie, I also knew Katie. She was like, there is an island where rivers run deep. I was crying again immediately, and it was so reactionary. Like as soon as the music, my brain just totally brought me back to the first time I saw the show, and I was just crying. I know I was probably distracting the crap out of your actors because I was like sitting in the front row just going
And you were in the front like that. I mean, for anybody who didn't get to see the show, that front row, and Michelle was in the show, but for those who didn't get to see the show, that front row was like literally on stage. Those actors were like literally at your feet, performing and singing. It was very intense to be there. Kendall says that first bass note in Once on This Island also gave me chills every night, and Kendall played in the pit for the show. But yeah, no, there are those shows and those overtures and those moments that just connect with us and resonate, and it shows our deeper connection. I definitely have those moments for myself too. Just for anybody who cares, there are two for me. One is I have a deep connection with Annie. I spent 2 years on the road with that show, and anytime that trumpet plays, it like literally starts to make me weepy because it just reminds me of all those experiences. But the other is Music Man. As soon as I hear that drum beat of the snares going in, literally I am a weeping mess. It doesn't even matter where. I could be in the grocery store, and I don't know why they're playing the overture to Music Man, but if they were playing it on the Muzak, I would just be crying over my eggplant or whatever. It would just be horrible. It's a hot mess. Michelle, since we're talking about overtures, what overture makes you cry? Which one gets you?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, I haven't thought about that one.
Sorry to throw you on the spot.
I know. I can't say that there's a particular overture that I'm going to go back to one of the shows that Cammi was talking about. For me, was the brain just went to Poughkeepsie.
I don't know that show. It sounds really good though.
That's my next musical.
Your next project, announced here on Reboot Represents. Michelle will be directing. The Brain Went to Poughkeepsie. Check for it in theaters after COVID.
Wasn't it Defying Gravity?
Wicked. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Woo! That's one that swell of da 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 da.
Yeah.
It just, I love that show. It is amazing. And when I hear that, because I have the CD and I play it all the time in the car,
right?
And I roll up my windows and scream all the music.
I have to say, so when Wicked first came out, this is a quick anecdote about me. It's not about me, but I'm going to share real quickly. When Wicked first came out and I put that CD in and I listened to it, I went, what is this hot mess of a show? I was like, this makes no sense. Thematically, it's all over the place. What is going on? They're making up words. This is garbage. I was like, I don't even care about this show. And I took it out and I didn't listen to it again. And then my partner and I at the time, we went to New York and he's like, I got tickets to Wicked. I'm like, okay, who cares? Yeah, and so we go and we sit in Wicked. We're in like the third row of this thing, and all of a sudden it's like bam, 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 and like the dragon is moving and like things are running around, and I was enraptured. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so I had to like eat some humble pie at that particular point for throwing the CD in the back of my car and wishing that I never saw it again. It was amazing, and I still cry though every single time though. Like when it comes on tour and I go see a production, I'm like, oh, they're gonna sing For Good. Who cares? Blah blah blah. They love each other. And then as soon as she's like, I've heard it said, I'm like, me too. I've heard everything, and I'm just weeping the whole time.
Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to steal the show.
Actually, for me, is Come From Away.
Oh yeah,
I've seen it like 5 times, and I kept taking back people to see it.
Yes. You were responsible for the sold out runs. That was
exactly.
It. Okay, perfect. Before we get to questions, we do have a couple questions showing up in the stream. I have a couple more questions for you. Michelle, I want to take this question to you as somebody who's been involved in the theater scene for a number of years. You've seen a lot of things stay the same and a lot of things change. What do you think are a few things that have changed for the better? And conversely, what do you think has stayed the same that is in need of a pretty drastic overhaul?
Okay. For me, it's kind of an odd question. Not odd question. It's just one of those. I came to Seattle at a time when multicultural theater was sort of all the rage. And it was an exciting time because you got to be in shows that you never would otherwise have a chance to be in.
So I do want to just clarify, when you say multicultural theater, is that essentially a form of colorblind casting where we're going to cast anybody in here, but really not draw attention to the fact that of their own personal experiences or anything? Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it isn't so much not drawing attention. I mean, it's one of those, you bring yourself to the role. So, you do what makes you in that role.
Right.
But the opportunity to get to play things that I wouldn't have ordinarily gotten a chance to play was exciting, and it was wonderful. And you learn so much about the craft. And so that was really appealing to me. Well, now we have this very different time where artists of all persuasions are demanding that their voice be heard. And I think this is great because it's creating a new array of diverse stories. But the challenge is that these new voices are creating stories that are often segregated. So we have all Asian, all Black, all Latino, all Native American, all LG, TBQ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And once again, I often have to wait for the all Black show.
Interesting.
And possibly consider stereotypical Black roles. So while there's nothing wrong with all this or that, and sometimes it's really very necessary, but I do feel that we as artists have to think hard and deep about what kind of vision we want to put forth in the world. Because right now we see politically what a monolithic society brings about, what a monolithic vision brings about. It creates us against them. And as long as there is just an us, there will always be a them. And we'll never get to we.
And we're just going to sit in that for just a second. That's really powerful.
So, and this is, for me, it's not an either or.
Right.
It has to be a both and.
Right. So that there's room for both types of art is what you're saying, but we can't be exclusionary in any sort of way. It can't just be one or, it has to be one and, yes. Because
people want to tell their stories. But what I find is, and you know, I've even said these words when I've thought of writing things and creating things, you know, I do things from a Black perspective because that's who I am. But does that mean I can't see other things? I can't work in other areas? You know, I can direct Shakespeare. I can be in Shakespeare. So it's about stretching ourselves and, empowering ourselves to come together as a society, to be the society we want to see. And we as artists can do that on stage.
Yeah, that's great. That's Cammi, I have a question for you, but I wonder if you have anything that you'd like to, I know this wasn't a question for you, but anything you'd like to add on top of that topic?
I just agree. Like it's definitely representation matters. And it really, it really happens too much where it's, you know, us versus them, you know, and I really, really agree with what Michelle said, is that like, we really have to think of it as not a problem to solve and more like just a shift, what we need to move to. It's just a new thing because, like, you know, theater, the whole world is evolving. Everything evolves. Theater has evolved, and that's just the next thing we need to evolve to. We need to make those things normal. It can't. It's having an all Latino cast or an all Black cast or an all LGBTQ cast. It's great and it's celebrated, but it shouldn't be so special. It should be, you know, it's special as in like it's special, but I mean, it shouldn't be just like a one-time thing. Like, okay, we did that and now we're going to go back to the old thing. Like it really needs to be a thing that we accept. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned representation mattering, and I'm wondering, that segues into my question for you, Cammi, is if you can talk a little bit about playing against type, and any opportunities that you've had to play against type and what that meant to you in terms of representation or anything else.
So the primary example in my career is going to be Joanna in Sweeney Todd, with Reboot Sweeney Todd. Being a plus size Black woman, I'm probably like that when somebody thinks Joanna for Sweeney Todd, probably the last thing they think of. And it's kind of part of the problem, like the idea that types exist, like the ingenue, even though people like to be progressive and they want to think I'm progressive. Let's be real. When you think ingenue, you think skinny white woman. Yeah, you always do. And it's just because that's how theater has been for so long. So being cast in this role opened my eyes to the idea that I could do that. Like I never really thought I've always had like very belty big roles. I was Reno Sweeney in Anything Goes. You know, I was Dolores Van Cartier in Sister Act. I got a belty voice, but I am also a lyric soprano, and people probably don't think of that from looking at me, or even like my speaking voice. My speaking voice actually sits quite low, but my head, I can go pretty darn high. I sang that D6 in Sweeney Todd.
Yes, you did.
So it's definitely, it was great to be able to be that, because I'm sure most people that saw the show have never ever seen that before, a plus size Black woman singing a soprano ingenue role. For me, it made me approach the role, I think, differently, because I feel like maybe for a woman that's played ingenues her whole life, like maybe it kind of is a formula for them. But because I've always played a big, I'm a confident role. I kind of approached the character that way. I was like, I didn't want to be quiet. I wanted to fight. It made me really try to make her different from what I've seen her be. And I've seen that show lots of times. It's like one of my favorite shows of all time. So yeah, it was great for me to be able to show that talent that I had, that I've never really been able to do before. Because like even when I just joined casts and they hear my speaking voice, they're like alto, and I'm like, okay, okay, I can do that. But I mean, I've got other talents too, so it was really great to step out of that. And now that I have that on my resume, people like see it and they're like, okay, so maybe she's not an alto. She's been Joanna before. So, but yeah, gosh, I really think that more theaters really should take chances like Reboot does, like, and not even for the sake of being different, because Reboot casts just some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. So, I mean, we can't even just say that Reboot just tries to be different. No, Reboot takes this. Okay, I was gonna curse.
You can swear. That's this kind of show. Jasmine's been on this show. If Jasmine's been on this show, you know that everything goes.
Yes. Yeah, Reboot takes this shit seriously. Reboot is passionate about theater and art and vision and representation, and I really think that more theaters in the Seattle area, and honestly just in general, should like take that like approach things with a more open mind. Don't approach a show like, if I could like send a message to all casting directors and directors out there, when you're casting the show, get it out of your mind who usually makes or plays that character, like the square-headed, brown-haired white guy playing the lead. Think differently, look at the other person. You might have a Latino person there that sings the crap out of that role, that acts the crap out of that role, or a Black man there that plays the crap out of that role. Like, open your mind and you'll just see the magic that you can make on stage when you're not boxing yourself in like that. So.
And it goes back to what Michelle was saying in terms of living that example that we want, in terms of, not necessarily making it, because this is the Black show or the Latin show or the gay show, you have to be those things. This is really a bigger representation, and normalizing it to the point where it doesn't have to be that special thing. It just becomes a part of our everyday lives, right? Right. Just a quick little side note, Cammi, though. You had mentioned against playing type. I only ever knew you as a soprano. Because we had been in rehearsals for Sweeney, and I've been hearing, I was like, oh my gosh, she can sing all of those crazy high notes. It's I just knew you as a soprano, and I stepped out into the hall on a break, and you were auditioning for something else in TPS. I don't know if you remember this, but you were auditioning for something else at TPS, and I was like, who is that? Because somebody was in that room, and they were just belting their faces off, and I was just like, what is happening in that room? Good for them. And you walked out of the room, and I was like, wait, what? That's the same person? Oh my gosh, literally, you were just in here like belting or singing high A's and all that other lyric stuff, and now anyway, so all right, we're gonna go to our panelists with some questions, and I think we have a question from Monique that says, what advice do you have for Black actors starting out in Seattle theater? Anybody can jump in with that. If you have anything, a piece of advice, a bon mot, a nugget, a pearl of wisdom.
Wow. Be true to yourself. It's, when you're just starting out, do as much as you can. Do go to as many auditions, get to know people in the theater. As much as you can, because often it's who you know. Back in the day, in I auditioned for Megs Booker, and anyone who's been around a long time knows Megs Booker used to be the artistic director of Intiman. She was notorious for making people cry, for making actors cry at their auditions. And so people said to me, well, when you go, watch out for her. And I did my audition, and she said to me, well, you definitely have the voice. What you do, what is it we call it in theater? You tend to illustrate with your hands. And in my head, I thought, I think you mean indicate. Illustrate is what you do to a book. But I didn't say that. So,
but what if you had, Michelle? What if you had?
Go there. He was a great person when you got to know her, but it's like that first thing where she would say something to you. So it didn't bother me, but it was the best piece of advice that I ever got, because I realized, I talk with my hands. And so I learned to choreograph my hands.
Wow.
So be open to criticism, and go as much as you can, because it's about getting the experience. I mean, I have been fortunate in that I have worked with a lot of people and a lot of really good people. And I learned a lot from watching other people performed. When I first moved here, I was the box office manager and the theater manager for the group theater. Mm-hmm. Back in the day. And the group theater is one of those theaters who did a lot of colorblind casting. And it was great to watch all kinds of people on stage doing all kinds of things. And they did some amazing theater. And I watched, and I spent a lot of time just watching people. And it taught me a lot. So go to those auditions, watch people's auditions, if you can. And learn as much as you can, and talk to people, ask questions. I learned to ask them, what did you do? What is your process? What is it that gets you to that moment where you can give your best performance? And having those conversations with people can really be helpful, I find.
No, absolutely. I think that so many people, and particularly today with technology, if we're not being used on stage, people are buried in their phones and they're, completely distracted. And for me, in that rehearsal process, it's really a masterclass being able to watch your colleagues work on stage, and just to say, oh, that's an interesting way to approach that. I never would have done that before. Why did they do that? And just to be able to take in the craft. I think people forget so much that you really are given that gift when you're sitting in rehearsal to be able to watch. And hopefully people take that to heart and continue to learn, right? I mean, it is a learning and evolutionary process that we are in.
And I think it's important to spend the time in rehearsal, not screwing around, but watching and learning and taking in. I had the privilege of working at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and a company of 60 people. It was awe-inspiring for me to watch other people. Those were some amazing actors, and to watch them in their process, just to sit there and see what they were doing and go, I like that. I'm going to steal that.
Right. So your advice to Monique's question would be to go audition, learn, and watch.
Yes.
Great.
And not be afraid also to approach people to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And get those questions answered. What about for you, Cammi? Any advice you would have for Black actors starting out in Seattle theater?
It's honestly a lot of the same, like work as much as you possibly can. The reason why you want to, especially when you're first starting out, I know we spoke earlier about like having like a list of things to like think about before you take projects, but you got to kind of like get to that point. First, you need to just work and build your resume. And the reason for that is because people are coming to see you. Directors, casting directors, producers are coming to these shows and they're seeing you perform. That is like kind of your reel. And you'd be surprised. Like I've had multiple opportunities. Some of my highest paying opportunities come from people that just came and saw me perform and said, I want you to audition for my show. Please audition for my show. That I would not have gotten otherwise. And audition your butt off. Like, especially at TPS, it feels like TPS auditions are very daunting because, it's very like mechanical. You got you have exactly 2 minutes and you have to go in there and you have to like time it right. Right. And sometimes like the last time I did it, they were like, I came on time and they said, hey, we're ahead of time. You're next. And I'm like, what? I just got here. So it's a very stressful experience, but oh my gosh, like there is huge opportunity because there's like 100 theaters that are all there that are just coming to try to see, they want to cast you. So do those opportunities. And like Michelle said, go to shows. Like that's probably the biggest thing that I notice, like actors in Seattle that don't do enough. And I don't do it enough. I go to some, I mean, I know not in COVID, but I mean, back before COVID, I went to some, but I really, really should have gone to more, because like there's shows happening every day in the city, and like a lot of them are free, a lot of them are very cheap, a lot of them you get a discount if you're a TPS member. Absorb that, meet people. If you saw a show and you somebody's performance just captured you, go to that cast store and meet that person. Be like, you were amazing, and I really want to know you. I really want to learn from you. It's really a great theme, because even though Seattle's theater community is very big, it's not Broadway big, so it's not that daunting. Like it's very small and interconnected, and you can make those connections pretty, and it's like Michelle said, it's not about it's somewhat about what you know, but it's really about who you know. And when you make those connections, people know people. Like I saw the other day that a friend, like somebody, Clay Aiken, came up on one of my Facebook. You might know these people because somebody I know knows Clay Aiken. So I'm just saying. Like, so
are you friends with Clay Aiken now? Are you guys?
I was tempted. I was like, who should I don't know.
Are you swapping memes or anything? No.
But I would just say, like people know people, and people will if you really have that talent, they want you to succeed, and they'll be like, hey, I know my friend here, like I know you're doing this equity show in the Village Theater or something like that, and I think you should give this person a shot. They're doing that for you, so make yourself known and meet people. Yeah. Don't be an introvert. I know I say I'm an introvert, but put that in your back pocket and just be put yourself out there.
Right.
But the one thing I will say, one big piece of advice I will say, when you go to an audition, do not try and do a new piece that you just learned the night before. Don't do it.
That is audition 101, right? Do not do that.
But, been there, done that. Do not do it. That is.
We all thought about it. We've all walked into that room going, I just learned this morning, and I am 100% confident that I can pull this out. And then you literally start, and you're like, nope, that's not the song that that's not what I thought it was at all.
Yeah, don't do that. Just don't do it, because you will be too nervous. You will forget. Everything will go wrong. Do not do it.
We have a question from Jasmine. Jasmine says, what are your bucket list roles or theater gigs? Could be directing or acting. So I'll give you a moment to think about that. If you have any other questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat window. We'll grab them before we wrap up our hour here. And then we'll go to you. We'll go to you first, Cammi. What's a bucket list role or a theater gig for you?
Bucket list, the one off the top of my head, Effie White. I want to play Effie White so bad. And it's really funny because right before I graduated college, the last semester I was in college, Village was doing Dream Girls. Oh. And that was the last, I'm like, okay, that's not going to come back for a few years.
Right.
So I got to hope that, because that was 5 years ago. So hopefully it comes back soon. But Effie White is number one for me. Luckily I was able to play Dolores Van Cartier in Sixth Act. I'd love to do that again. But yeah, those two roles, those big belty, I'm the star, give me the spotlight kind of shows.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. What about for you, Michelle?
Well, shall we talk about Fraulein Schneider and Cabaret?
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, Michelle was cast as Fraulein Schneider in Reboot's production of Cabaret, which, Cammi, you are also in Cabaret too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a dream role for you. A bucket list role?
Yes, and I'm just, COVID just has me so pissed off for so many reasons, but I was so looking forward to that, and so that's one. Directing, what you talk about, Sister Act. I want to direct Sister Act. I really, really do.
It sounds like we're making a partnership right here in this. So if you guys can figure out the negotiations and the contracts and just get that to each other, that would be great. So just keep us informed. Reboot will take a 10% cut. It'll be great. Any other roles for you, Michelle, on stage or off?
Oh, dear. Well, on stage. The older I get, I just go, whoever will cast me in whatever. Once on this island was amazing for me, and that you saw Agwe in me. It was like, okay, because I remember I called you and said, "Oh, what?"
I remember that conversation. I remember that conversation very well. Yes.
It's like, and it wasn't, that I was upset about it. It was like, okay, I just had, my brain hadn't gone there.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you see? What is your expectation of me in that role? And it was wonderful. It was amazing. So sometimes things that we don't foresee in ourselves turn out to be amazing experiences. And so, I hope that someone sees something that, I didn't even think I could do or would be casted. Because a lot of times it's not that you don't think you could do it. It's that what we know of theater these days, you just don't see that someone is going to cast you that.
Right.
Because the same, I have a low voice. Well, I remember so vividly being in high school, and there's a song called Lord, I Don't Feel No Ways Tired. And I sang in the New York All City High School Choir. And there's a lead tenor in it. And I wanted to sing it because I could sing it better than the guys could.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't let me because I'm a girl. And so it was always very frustrating to me that through most of my career, I never got the opportunity to utilize that part of my voice. So doing Agwe was like, wow, I finally get to do this.
Well, and the amazing thing about, I'm going to just jump on this train for just a second, but the great thing about your performance, and that we didn't change the key for you at all, I don't think.
Right.
I think it was exactly in the original key.
Yeah.
You sang it exactly as written and were so incredibly powerful. And like when you were bringing home that moment at the end with, the rain moment, like people were leaping to their feet. Everybody was just in that. Cammi knows. Cammi was crying in the front row.
I remember that. Ooh.
Yeah.
So, it's finding those types of things. I mean, I got to play Feste the Fool in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. So doing things like that are against type or whatever are really exciting to me now.
Absolutely. And I think both of you have said something that we can kind of wrap this show up with in terms of advice, going back to your question, Monique, too, is really just being honest and being who you are and bringing that into the room and just allowing yourself to be in that space as you, whatever that version of you is.
Right.
I think that really says a lot. Michelle, you had mentioned earlier, we see the Broadway tapes and technology has made it so easy to see other performances and things like that now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can so easily spot somebody who has copied a performance and has forgot to bring their own part to it and their own heart and their own humanity to it. And if we can just keep being honest, that would be the greatest thing, right? We are coming up on our time here. We're actually a little bit over, and I don't know that there are any more questions in the chat. So I do want to leave tonight and put this question to both of you. If you could put one or two thoughts out into the universe about how the theater could provide real leadership for women, for non-binary artists, the BIPOC artists who are working, what thought would that be? I'll give you a second to think about that, and then either one of you can jump in.
I think the biggest thing is to listen and to validate people. Like we see all of these reports coming out of people coming forward because they were like, there was abuse that happened, and at the time nobody would listen. Like they would tell the producer and the producer wouldn't do anything. They'd tell the stage manager, the stage manager wouldn't do anything. And it's really alarming how often that happened and how that kind of still happens. So the biggest thing that I would want to put out there is listen to your people. Validate what they're listening to and take it seriously, and act, and doing that, if we can like get a culture of doing that, of treating people like the humans that they are, I think the industry would just be a lot, I don't want to say it's toxic, but I'm saying like it would just be a better place for everybody involved if people were to, came with it just a little bit more empathy, and it's not just all like business is business, but business, empathy fits in business too.
Right,
so.
Right. That's great. What about for you, Michelle?
I definitely agree with that. And sort of along those lines, when you talk about listening, allowing, when there are casting calls, allowing actors to come to it with their thoughts about who they want to audition for, as opposed to the, you know, as Cammi was talking about earlier, the preset. You've got, you know, the skinny white girl always auditioning for the ingenue. Let's bring some other ideas to that. If someone, you know, else that just totally doesn't fit that type wants to audition, be open to that. See where that may go. I mean, you know, one of the things for me as a director, I try and do, if an actor comes with an idea to do something that just is totally wasn't in my thought process, I go, let me think about that. And then I go home and, you know, it's like, what can I do to make that work? And if I can find a way, one, they're more invested in the project.
Right.
And, you know, and we've created something that, wow, this is so much bigger than where we started.
Right.
So let people bring to you the gifts that they have to bring, as opposed to going down this narrow path that we normally go down. And I think theater will be such a much more amazing, you know, thing in the end.
I agree. Well said, Michelle. Well said. You have a lot of fans in the chats, friends. People have been singing. People are buying tickets already to you playing Effie. Kathy didn't know that Agwe was supposed to be played by a written for a man because they had only ever seen you, Michelle. You just have a lot of fans and everything. I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight on this episode of Reboot Represents. We also want to thank Kat Korn for being here and going through all of those technical issues. We will have Kat back on in the future for another show. Special thanks, of course, to all of you for watching the show, and I hope that you will join us next time on April 5th for our next episode of Reboot Represents. We will be focusing on disabilities in the arts, so be sure to check our Facebook page as well as reboottheater.org for details and guest announcements. Special thanks, as always, to Kevin Tanner, producer, who is making all the magic behind the scenes happening, and for all of you, again, for watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you giving up your Monday evening to spend this hour and 20 minutes with us. For Reboot Represents, I'm your host, Harry Turpin, reminding you to trust yourself, to be yourself, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.